Yeah.
It's coming.
It is. We'll start now.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhakar, and of course, Mr. Raja, for the initial remarks. Prabhakar, you just said, as you have been me most of the time, because the way you recapitulated and that too chronologically, I think I could not have done it for myself. So you shows the level of interest that you have in my life and the kind of friend you had been over 5 decades. I think I should have been very privileged. And every time I hear you, I talk to you, I meet you, one thing comes back to my mind. What a wonderful world this is if you have friends like Prabhakar. And once more you are shown what you are to me. I'd like to thank you, Prabhakar, for those very nice and kind words. It comes out of your heart, I know it very well. And that is one of the reasons you are one of the very few friends who has withstood a 5 decade of association. You know that there is generally a pattern. It may not be Gaussian distribution. You know, initially you build up your associations. You go, the numbers go up. This is not a COVID trend. This is a friendship trend. It goes through a peak when you are at the peak of your association and power and influence, and it slowly goes. But what is very significant is the tail of the distribution, because there are very few who are left at that particular point in life, and they are really the one who have been filtered out of a large thousands of people you have been associated with during your career and otherwise in life. And Prabhakar, you continue to steal the show in that fag end of the distribution. And thank you so much, Prabhakar. I will always remember your statements whenever you make and wherever you make. Well, I would like to thank the Artistry Association for this very unique privilege you have extended to me in asking me to talk about the key policy elements of a recently finalized, prepared the education policy for this country. I may say that this policy is currently with the government. The government is in the process of processing this, and I'm sure that not in the for in a short future, I should say, we should see the light of the day in terms of this policy being adopted by the cabinet and ultimately thus becoming a policy for the country. And I do know that we have got some very distinguished members among the audience today. Educationists, Rotary people. We've got people from Bombay, we've got from Pune, from Gujarat, and of course a large number from Hyderabad, from Bangalore. And I know they are all well versed in this particular area of education, educationists, as well as people who really conceptualize what the system should be in a dynamic world where things get changing rather fast, and particularly in the context of many developments that are taking place in the social, cultural, economic, as well as technological. So this is certainly something I should only say before I conclude my early remarks that when I was in when the committee was in the process of making this particular policy, one of the key element was many people were following this policy how it was, because we used to be quite open in terms of our thoughts and sharing it with whomsoever wanted to know where we stand. And one of the key elements was the internationalization of our education. And I had my friend Prabhakar in this area because he has worked for quite some time in the internationalization of education, and he even offered to help me in drafting this part of the internationalization of the education. I should say it has come out very well, the section on the internationalization. And the quality of the presentation, I owe much to Prabhakar's vision of internationalization for education. I would like to say this right in the beginning of this. Sometime in July 2017, I was driving down to my office in the morning in Bangalore, and there was a call from Javdekarji. I knew Javdekarji for quite some time. I was a member of the Rajya Sabha. He was a member at the same time. We were together at the Standing Committee on Power. We used to sit together and discuss many issues related to, especially the renewable power sources. And we used to raise quite a number of interesting issues with in that committee, Standing Committee. But I want to say that the Standing Committee is always a very, very effective medium to share the thoughts in a closed room, unlike you see what happens sometimes in Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha. And so we became quite good friends, and it continued. And even after the BJP came to power, we continued to be in touch. And we used to go to convocation and many other places where you used to share the problems. One of the places we said, "How are you doing, Kasturirangan ji? I have not forgotten, and also I'm not going to leave you." That is the kind of an impression he gave me. And then several months passed, and one day in July 2017, this call came. And true to his way of communicating, he simply said, "Kasturi Ranganji, I want you to chair this national education policy. Uh, there is still things to be seen, and there are versions of it available for you, but you need to look at it. I am putting a committee together." There was no discussion on who the committee member should be. That was not my this thing. He said everything will be done properly, so don't worry about it. Just take it over and do a job. And I also want to tell you that how much time do you need to have? And he also told me that 4 years of work has been done already. So how much time do you need to give a completeness to this? And there are a few specific areas where I want you to look at it very carefully with this committee. And I, in my enthusiasm, said I can do it in 6 months because there is already a 4-year job which has been completed. He said, "Okay, please do that, and the order will come by day after tomorrow." By next day itself, an order came, and I could see. And of course, only one member. I didn't know the members of this committee. They were all new to me. They had their own standing in the education field, but also in areas which is related to education. But then I didn't know them, but that is less important. But they were people with their own mind. That's what I want to say this. And once we met, the first thing that the members of the committee said that we need to revisit this entire policy, and you are committed 6 months for this. It is just not going to work. And that was the first judgment they made about my commitment to Javadekar. I knew the trouble starts right there, because he is not. They are no longer accepting the fact that we need to just do fine tweak the existing version. So then we went into the detail. Of course, the committee recognized that the vision of India's education system has to be crafted to ensure that it touches the life of each and every citizen, consistent with their ability to contribute to many growing developmental imperatives, and also towards creating a just and equitable society. So some of the important aspects that they want us to look at, the committee wanted this committee to look at, certainly stemmed from this broad view that the education has to be all encompassing. Members shared the opinion that India has a very long and illustrious history of holistic education, a preparation for life in a world or life beyond schooling, competition, complete realization and liberation of the self. Culturally, India has been and continues to be a cradle of great diversity in all walks of life. I don't have to say this, whether it is in languages, dialects, classical dance forms, classical music forms, well-developed traditions of folklore, music, pottery, sculpture. I can just relive. And of course, we have the other part of it, the science, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and so on and so forth. These rich legacies, the world heritage, need to be nurtured. The third element is it has to address the unfinished agenda of the National Policy on Education 1980s. There were some of the extraordinary policy framework that were given to this country 1986, modified 1992. And one of the important things is not only the unfinished agenda, whatever is the reason, we have to look at it, see the relevance in the present context, and also equally importantly, the subsequent developments. For example, the free and compulsory education was one of this. The other aspect of it is the coming in of the internet revolution, the role of technology. I may mention at the time when the technology was introduced, I think we have been fatally slow to adopt technology at that particular point. Then the next point was globalization and the demands of a knowledge economy and a knowledge society. There was the other part of it. And therefore, you have to address the question of continuous learning, and then a demographic dividend, which is expected to last for a little of 20 years. So how are we going to deal with the demographic dividend to make sure that you have a policy which is which is well equipped with knowledge, skills, attitude, and values, and employable skill towards India's social, economic, and political transformation. And ultimately, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, you know what part of the Sustainable Development Goals came? SDG 4, particularly 5 of the 7 targets in the SDG 4 is on quality of education and learning outcomes, need to be reflected appropriately. It is also promoting lifelong learning. Keeping all this in mind, the committee went ahead with this thing, and in the next 2 years, we had a fairly comprehensive set of discussions, educators, researchers, policy makers, sector experts, industry, academics, community groups, and so on and so forth. Consultation we had with 75 organizations, institutions, and associations. Then we had also the policy documents that were there since the inception of India, the education, the educational documentation and other related documentation. Then we also had very intense discussion with various religious. I can tell you, so some of these sects are very important. Ultimately, they influence politically the whole course of things. So we had to make sure that their voice is heard. How we try to integrate it into our ideas and other thing. So we had Jains, Buddhist monks came and talked to us. I traveled down to Raipur and beyond to see the Jain Muni, Vidyasagarji, just to have a half-day session with him about what the Jain's philosophy of education is. 6 came, the Archbishop of Delhi and others came, Muslim groups came. So we left nobody who wanted to come and have to share their ideas about education. So that was the kind. And ultimately, when the report came, we thought now the government will accept it, having gone through this kind of a consultation. But government, in its fairness, said that no, let us put it into the public domain. The public domain elicited something like 2 lakh responses to this particular thing. So one had to go through that part of an assessment, what this 2 lakh inputs are from the public thing. And ultimately, of course, we made the necessary changes compared to that. And that is where we stand today, so far as the thing is concerned. So from here onwards, having given this brief introduction, I would like to now share with you some of the important elements of the policy. I won't go now into the details of this kind of thing. Some of the key elements with respect to schools, I would like to start with in the NEP 2020. This is the broad thing. I will touch upon few of these elements in the subsequent narration, but these are the important things which we have introduced into the policy, the areas of focus in school education, early childhood care and education covering children between 3 to 8 years. This is a very significant departure from the earlier one. I will show a little bit of it to tell you why. Ensuring foundational literacy and numeracy for every child, stemming dropouts and ensuring 100% enrollment by 2030. This is a very major issue today, and you will see that why. Extension of RTE at both the ends. The question of whether it should be a right to education or it should be an initiative-based thing is still under discussion, but there will be some kind of an RTE equivalent, if not RTE itself, within 3 and 18 years, and a new developmentally appropriate curriculum and pedagogy. 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 against 10 plus 2. No distinction between curricular and extracurricular and co-curricular, and between arts and science, vocational and professional. So this is another aspect of it in the case of the school level. And then, of course, a new national curriculum framework naturally has to be crafted, and with the work is already started. And the central role for teachers, rigorous preparation, robust, and I know most of you know being education is where we stand with regard to the teacher level. And then finally, the school complex has some of the ideas as to how do we optimize the resources in this country to support teachers and provide shared resources, and also bring in the governance reforms. First, I will go through the 5 plus 2, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, the school period. The extent of 10 plus 2 structure in school education thus will be modified according to our recommendation with a new pedagogical and curricular restructuring, which will be the 5, 3, 3, 4, covering 3 to 18. What it means is that the education starts at the age of 3 and goes up to 8 in the initial phase, which is really a preschool phase. What we try to do is that the policy recognizes the individual differences in the cognitive development of children at this stage, and therefore formal structured learning will be absent during the first five years, starting from 3 years of age. I want to say this because at this particular point, when we enter into the details of the children, their ability to understand various aspects of an ecosystem, we found that today the subject of neural sciences, cognitive sciences have made so much of advances that we have a better understanding of the ability of how the brain really responds to inputs. And thus, what comes out in the thing is when I say about the formal structured learning, prior to age 8, children learn through play-based, activity-based, and discovery-based multi-level flexible styles of learning and interaction. They do not follow a linear age-based educational trajectory. That's a very important point, which made us look into the early part of the education in a little different way. Learning includes gradual movement from observation and wonderment. This you call as a perceptual. So perceptual, it goes to names and symbols and representation. You call it conceptual. So you see that there is a transition that is occurring in this particular time, and that is where the foundational part of it comes into picture to make sure that the perceptual phase, the conceptual phase, and the ability to address the questions of different age-based educational trajectories which are not the same for individual students, and we have to address it at the level of that. Therefore, no structuring of an education is possible. These were the important points that were considered while defining what the foundational education has to be, and that's for the first 5 years. 3 years, what you call the pre-primary, and then the class 1 and 2, which is the 5, 7 and 8. Then comes the preparatory and the middle school part of it. And here the important thing is the curricular structure and standardization can be slowly introduced, because around this age, children begin to adopt naturally to a more prescriptive style of learning, indicating teaching learning processes can transition to a more formal style using basic textbooks. This kind of school readiness is critical for the child's success, and that's one of the reasons why we put the foundational period of 5 years to start with, starting from the age 3. So you have the preparatory as well as the middle school period. Curricular structure and standardization will be slowly introduced, and the policy takes into account that the only after the age 8, so that the children can start having the capacity of abstraction. So what you learn as arithmetic can become algebra and those kind of a thing. So that part of it is recognized based on the development of the child's growth, and especially the brain growth. And ultimately, the secondary part of it will be the multidisciplinary orientation with the option. This is the phase which will also prepare the student for the undergraduate program, including early introduction of the liberal arts education. So this is a period of 3 to 18. It is a curricular restructuring is called for, and a new pedagogical approach is called. And this is the major change that we have brought in the early childhood care and education and the school education itself. I will just interact here with a little of explanation of the problem that we have faced in this country with respect to who start behind. How do you say that the children who start behind, they stay behind? You really look at the analysis that are carried out by the experts. There is a theoretical line of development for advantaged children, and the worst cases where we have the development of a disadvantaged children. And one can see the gap between the birth time and the 10 years of age. And one can see it in terms of phases, 3 to 3 years or 3 to 6 years, for the quality level and preschool education, or 6 to 8. So what is important, the entire policy looks at the gap and then formulates such of the policies and program that can reduce this gap between the disadvantage and the advantage. So this is one of the key elements. We have addressed it in great detail with regard to specifying what should be the kind of pedagogy and curricular approaches at different phases. And this is a very interesting statement that has been made from one of the reports, international report, ECD. A powerful equalizer returns on investment in the early childhood care and education, which is the World Bank study 2015 estimate that in 2015 rupee terms, for every rupee invested in preschool classes, returns up to 25 rupees will be generated, but quality matters. So one can just see the kind of study that has been done and the kind of advantages when you have to deal with preschool and primary education. I will come to another important area, which is related to foundational literacy and education. If you really look at the present situation, the policy recognizes the learning crisis in language and mathematics during the primary school years and its impact on attendance, retention, and later learning. A large proportion of students currently in elementary school, estimated to be 5 crores in number, have not attained foundational literacy. And I am sure all of you, and I don't have to repeat this, but what we have tried to look at is to see that every student in grade 3 and beyond must achieve foundational literacy and numeracy as per this policy by 2025. And some of the important measures we try to identify: teachers vacancy, of course, you know the problems of that, and also bring in an optimal pupil to student teacher ratio, PTR of 30:1, and then increase focus on language and mathematics, learning up to the grade 3 with a robust system for continuous, continuous formative and adaptive assessment to track and thereby individualize. So this is another thing, the question of focus on language and mathematics. Then a national, we don't have all the material that you need to address this issue of foundational literacy and numeracy. So we have recommended a national repository of high quality resources for foundational literacy and numeracy. And this is a huge task. It is not the question of 5 crores. In another 10 years, it will become 10 crores, this number. So one has to really deal with it on a massive scale. And now there is a national mission to deal with the universal foundational literacy and numeracy. And the policy recommends one-to-one peer tutoring, create trained volunteers for local community and beyond, and many other steps that may be needed. These are not regular type of steps, but for a period of 10 years, you need to bring in these kind of arrangements wherein you get community support for this kind of a thing. And ultimately, of course, the expansion of the midday meal program to include breakfast. We discussed this question. After all, there is economics here. But we found that if you got only a midday meal, the child really starts learning things only after the midday meal, because you can't start learning in the morning in empty stomachs. And there could be a tremendous impact of having an early breakfast in addition to midday meal. We have strongly recommended this. And there is a support, good support at the present juncture from the government in trying to see how this can be translated into ground reality. The other aspect is the multilingualism and the power of language. I just want to say this because the country has witnessed, soon after the policy was put into the public domain, there were concerns about 3-language formula, whether Hindi will be imposed and things of that kind. I only want to say that the language problem is not related to 3-language formula, or the question of that whether one should learn Hindi or one should not learn. There is something much more fundamental about learning languages. And I've tried to summarize some of these aspects of it. It has nothing, the fact of 3-language formula, we have said it can continue to be implemented. There is a political will for that. Acceptance in different places, and keeping in mind the constitutional provision, aspiration, and so on. But what is important to recognize is that the child pick up languages extremely quickly between ages 2 and 8. And that multilingualism has great cognitive benefits on the children. Cognitive benefit beyond the learning of language itself. In fact, the locations of the brain which are responsive to the language, their response to how you try to, how they try to respond to bringing in new language as a part of education, and how it improves the cognitive effects. This has now been researched, and there are very positive impact in terms of this. So that is the one that we have taken into account. And also, so this part of it If you can learn three, then definitely three languages is something which you are recommended. Can be even four, but most importantly also, that every student in the country should participate in a fun project. We have went further in trying to learn languages in India. We have suggested a Languages of India course, which is between age of grade 6 and 8, where we learn about the remarkable unity about the most of the major languages of India, starting from their common phonetics and scientifically arranged alphabets and script, their common grammatical structure and sources of vocabulary, Sanskrit and other classical language. So this is a very interesting aspect of a language course. This is not only meant for humanities students or people who only want to take interest in language, but there is a broader question here of trying to understand the language and their structure. And there is so much of logic in it that we suggested it in the school period between the grade 8, 6 and 8 to have a special fund project for the languages of India. We have given importance to Sanskrit being both a classical and modern language. It will be offered at all levels of school and higher education as important enriching option. The policy also envisages learning other classical languages. You know that Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Odia, including additional Pali, Persian, and Prakrit. These are all classical languages which has to be given much more important than what is probably available with regard to the teaching. And foreign languages is another important thing we need. India is becoming globalized, and we need to have not only in the question of understanding the culture and the rest of the aspects of the language, but also for the student to have a global knowledge and mobility. So this has been considered. And lastly, I should also say that the role of technology is becoming much more effective in the context of learning languages, and introduction of extensive use of technology has to be brought in both for teaching or learning of different languages. Another important thing that I would like to bring is the question of resourcing and effective governance through school complexes. The problem can be simply stated as follows. Nearly 28% of India's primary schools and 14.8% of India's upper primary school have less than 30 students. Average number of students per grade elementary schooling system, grade 1 to 8, is about 14, with notable proportion having below 6. During the year 2016 to 2017, there were 119,000 single teacher schools, majority of them, 94,000, being primary schools serving grades 1 to 5. So this is the basic problem that we have looked at. The policy identifies possible mechanisms to address the resulting inadequacies, such as lack of effective and efficient deployment of teachers, inability to impart education in areas such as music, arts, and sports, as well as suboptimal physical resources like scientific labs, sports equipment, library books, and so on, and establishment of a group. In fact, the idea of a school complex is not new. It was there even in 1986 for some reason or another. Of course, the development, the broader issues of development, transportation, and things of kind, this could not really find the light of the day. We have made a very strong recommendation that we have one secondary school together with other schools offering lower grade in education with a radius of 10 miles to be put into what you call as a school complex. Such a complex or a cluster will help build a vibrant communities of teachers, school leaders, better integrate education across all school levels, including vocational education and adult education, and share key material resources like libraries, science laboratories, sports facilities, and so on and so forth. And most importantly, you also remove the isolation of teacher. When you talk of a single teacher system in such large number of schools, you can imagine that there is no way the teachers can enrich themselves and enhance themselves in their ability or to visualize what more has to be done. So here is an opportunity to bring the group of subject, the teachers, the teachers together into a community with its own positive impact. School management committee and school complex management committee, this could be further improved with regard to the management of the school. The ownership can be much more focused, and we have also said that sharing of these kind of resources is possible not only among the private public schools, but it can be also shared between public and private schools with the necessary agreements on financial and other commitments. I would quickly go to this aspect of the standard setting. I don't want to get too much into the standard setting part of it. What we are trying to do is to recommend a change in the system of standard setting, accreditation, and regulation by separating out the role of the various current system of school education management and making sure that they are independent of each other and they don't tread on the toes of each other, and because of that overlap create enough confusion and also inefficiency in the overall management. So school education will be responsible for the overall monitoring, policy making for continuous improvement. Directorate of School Education will handle the educational operations and service provision. State and union territories will set up an independent statewide body called the State School Standards Authority, and they will look into the minimal set of standards based on basic parameters such as safety, security, basic infrastructure, number of teachers across subjects and grades, the probity, and so on and so forth. Academic matters, including academic standards and curricula in the state, will be by the State Council of Educational Research and Teaching in close collaboration and consultation with the national NCERT. The CERT will also develop school quality assessment accreditation framework SQUAP through wide consultation with all the stakeholders. Public and private schools will be assessed and accredited with the same criteria, benchmarks, and processes, emphasizing online or offline public disclosure and transparency. The reason I put this is there is definitely a change needed with regard to the school management and governance, particularly when it comes to regulation, accreditation, as well as standard setting. There are enough amount of conflicts in the present system, overlaps in the present system. And what we are trying to do is to address these issues and see there is minimal cross-coupling between the different roles in an educational governance system. I go to now a very important and the next part, which is the higher education. I'm sorry, I'm rushing through because the time available is what is controlling now my for the rest of the talk. It's already, Mr. Raja, we are 5:15
no,
now.
Please
Try to. I am very conscious of the time that is to be given, but I try to give a little more time in the school.
Please.
Only because of the fact that there are things which we need to really understand about school, which you changed as a policy. That's why recommended as a policy. Next thing about higher education, again, the problem of fragmented higher education, 50,000 higher education schools in this country, and many of them offering the same type of problem that we see in school. A lack of emphasis on learning outcomes and this, rigid separation of discipline, too much of over specialization, lack of access in higher education, lack of teacher and institutional autonomy in a way, and many other things, lack of research in higher educational institutions, suboptimal governance, inadequate regulatory system, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things, and what we have recommended. We have recommended that we need to move towards a higher educational system consisting of large multidisciplinary universities and colleges with at least one in or near every district, and with more HEIs across India that offer medium of instruction on programs on local and India language. This to us is a very important thing with regard to the size and the optimality of the number of resources and the number of students that you need to bring in. We think multidisciplinarity essentially also means that you have more number of subjects, more number of activities, and you need to have a critical mass of students, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 kind of a number and going beyond. Moving towards a more multidisciplinary undergraduate education, moving towards, and this is something I would like to come back a little more in detail, moving towards faculty and institutional autonomy, revamping curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, and student support, and reaffirming the integrity of faculty and establishment of a national research foundation. To me, the last point is also important, even though the research normally is only after undergraduate education and postgraduate education, and this is research. But to us, now we are discussing quite a lot about research and its implications in the context of India's economic growth. And the other aspect of it, of course, is the governance of higher education by highly qualified. There are issues. Currently, I'm sure most of you know what the problems of higher education. Governance is light but tight regulation with a single regulator, increased access, equity, and inclusion through a range of measures. Now, I would say a little bit about this holistic education, because I think that one of the important changes that we like to recommend and to bring about is with regard to the way the undergraduate education is currently going on and the type of changes that would be in conformity with the kind of demands of the 21st century skills that we are talking about. Uh, it is to promote liberal education, undergraduate level, more imagination and creativity in the student to ensure their holistic development. That's a fundamental thing. The concept of a high holistic education in the Indian context is it's an age-old idea. We used to call it as a mastering of 64 kalas, which is arts encompassing music, dance, painting, sculpture, and so on, in addition to subjects such as science, engineering, and mathematics, as well as vocational subjects such as carpentry. And unless you master the 64 kalas, you will not be considered or recognized as a fully educated person in our ancient system. Liberal education explores the remarkable, this is the same thing put in the present context. Liberal education explores the remarkable relationships that exist among the sciences and humanities, mathematics and arts, medicine and physics, and more generally, the surprising unity of all fields of human endeavor. A comprehensive liberal education develops all capacities of human beings: intellectual, aesthetics, social, emotional, moral, in an integrated manner. So, what is it that when we move towards a holistic education, what are the kind of things that one can see as a crucial step to lead India into the 21st century and the fourth industrial revolution? Multidisciplinary education is central. Even engineering schools such as IITs will move towards more holistic, multidisciplinary education with more arts and humanities. While arts and humanities students will aim to learn more science, we talk of STEM, STEAM, and so on and so forth, while all will try to make effort to incorporate more vocational subjects and soft skills. India's rich legacy in the arts as well as in sciences and beyond will significantly help in making the move towards such an education an easy and natural transition. So what does it mean when you transfer this into an actual educational system? The liberal education with broad multidisciplinary exposure, that is what we said earlier, imaginative and flexible curricular structure, creative combinations of disciplines of study, multiple exit and entry points. Here, this is very important. I would like to exercise this. I've mentioned, come back to that. Masters and doctoral education will provide research-based specialization. 3 to 4 year undergraduate degree with multiple exit option is what we have recommended. The 3 year program, which is the current bachelor's program with the foundational aspect of liberal education, will continue, and that will be the base. A 4 year program, a bachelor of liberal education, will in chosen areas of minors and majors will be the next step. Both 3 year and 4 year program will lead to a degree with honors with research when you do research. And finally, exit with a 2 year. In the first 2 years itself, you can have an exit with an advanced diploma or a 1 year diploma. So first year, second year, the diplomas with exit with diplomas. Third and fourth year, degree or degree with honors, with research. So these are the characteristics. And flexible master's degree program, 2 years to those with the 3 year undergraduate and 1 year those. I don't want to go into the details of all this. But the most important thing is we have recommended a restructuring of the undergraduate education, bringing in the foundational aspects of liberal education, and at the same time, try to maintain broadly the kind of 3 year and 4 year kind of a thing, but with the research component also being brought in. Now, there are other points that I would like to mention. I said about the National Research Foundation. And one other, I don't have to say too much to this erudite audience about the need to have the research, except for the fact that India's present R&I, research and innovation investment is only 0.7% of the GDP at 2014. This needs to be compared with the corresponding figures of 2.1% in China or 2.8% in US or 4.3% in Israel. So one can see there are at least 3 times the proportion of GDP. And if you really look at the kind of impact that this kind of an R&D input goes into the economy of the system, I can put here the European Union. There, 2/3 of the economic growth of Europe during 1995 to 2000 came from the research and innovation. The research and innovation accounted for 15% of all productivity gains between 2013. And there is an annual increase of 0.2% in GDP. Investment would result in an annual increase of 1.1%, a five-fold return. So one can see this. We have a low level of investment. We have the correspondingly per lakh population is only, the scientists among the per lakh population is only 15. This is related to 111 in China, 423 in US, or even 825 in Israel. So this is the kind of numbers that we recognize as crucial to take a view on what the policy on research has to be. What we have tried to recommend is, of course, the main recommendation is with respect to strengthening the educational research in university system. It's in decimal state. The 900 and odd universities in this country certainly needs more attention in the research. A fund to seed research in all universities and colleges is the first part of it. The NRF will fund research across all disciplines significantly at all universities and colleges, including private institutions. And then it will have four major divisions. At the present juncture, we have recommended science, technology, social sciences, arts, and humanities, but with the permission to create more. And you know the scope of the research, I don't have to repeat this: funding research through competition, competitive process, building research capacity, which is a must because of the fact that currently many of the universities do not have research capacity in appropriate areas where they should be doing research, both for the knowledge sake as well as for the local and many other national requirements. Creating beneficial linkages between researchers, government, and industry. We discussed quite a lot about this, but I think we need to strengthen the system, create the system, and strengthen the system, disseminating research through seminars. I wanted to say this because, of course, there are many other things that one could have said about this. But when I come to research, and Prabhakar particularly said that I should say something about my own entry into the research and a little bit about my own association in that connection, getting into Sarabhai's ambit. And I remember when I was a student and trying to get into the research program of PRL, the Physical Research Laboratory, and he was the one who finally takes a decision on all the students in those years. And he was trying to, first and foremost, trying to ascertain how good I am and how serious I am. So first, about seriousness, he wanted to discourage me to do research, and he did everything in his arsenal to say the research is a very uncertain area, very challenging area, and it won't give you several years. You can be just working without any results and those kind of a thing. And if anybody would have been put off, he could have been put off. Certainly, he would have been put off because of the fact, the type of very dissuading arguments that he was doing. On the other side, he also said that it may be a very uncertain thing. You may not get a PhD. And with all that thing, I stuck to the guns. And then he sent a question quite seriously and rather with rigorous thinking in terms of what is the kind of understanding I have of the fundamentals of science and concepts of creativity and original thinking. And that was a very remarkable piece of an experience that I had with him. And finally, he said that yes, but then the third one important condition he laid, that if I'm going to work in the research area in the physical research laboratory, he would like me to have experimental side. He said, whereas certainly you can work in theory, but I think experiment should be an important part of your research work, because I want you to know what the world is by wetting your hand in various things. So he put me to things like metal cutting, sheet metal, glass blowing, creation of the electrical discharge studies and things of that kind. I think it was a very remarkable experience. Even as you learn theory, even as you do modeling, you were also getting into the laboratory and shaking your hands. I want to say this because years later, when you try to start looking at a program like space, and the space has a multi-dimensional character, and I found that you need to have basic understanding of science, you need to have the basic understanding of engineering and technology, you need to have a system engineering concept. Sarabhai played a lot of emphasis on the systems engineering. He thought that where people understand mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, communication engineering, the requirement of a synergy between these, and when you try to create a satellite or rocket, many of these people don't understand this very clearly. So we need to strengthen the systems engineering, and then of course the questions of management, the questions of dealing with configuration control, There are many other, how do you deal with when you create a product like this? How do you deal with the users who may be outside your system and who would like to use it? What do you call the stakeholders? So, and then there are industries who would be looking for certain type of work that they can do for you. So he was trying to slowly gear you into the first step toward this kind of a thing. And as you try to understand him, as you try to follow the culture and thinking that he had, by the time I got into satellite area, and Prabhakar and myself, we both know what it would mean to work in a satellite area for the first time and sat to Aryabhat, simply because the first time we are wetting our hand with a satellite, and the satellite is a multidisciplinary system, and we didn't have the full understanding of what that system is going to be, so we had to do it right from the beginning. And over the next 30 years, 30 months, we worked not only to build the satellite, also to build the instrument. Sarah Prabhakar was responsible for the solar neutron and gamma rays. I worked on X-ray astronomy, besides also looking at the satellite program too. But this was an amount of energy, the amount of knowledge that you need to really absorb. But that was possible because some level of a grounding, some level of a confidence Sarabhai gave us. And the most important anecdote I would like to conclude this with about Sarabhai is that we were assigned to study the upper atmospheric radiation, as Prabhakar said, using balloons. And first balloons were flown from Ahmedabad. We built an instrument, two of my colleagues and myself. And we wanted to fly this instrument in a balloon early morning, because early morning the wind conditions are much more favorable. And when we wanted to, when we went into the ground and went to the field to attach this instrument to the balloon and take it up, because we wanted to study the radiation, different altitudes of the atmosphere, we found that the instrument was running into trouble. There was some kind of a peculiar, extra spurious signals, and we found out that it was an electromagnetic interference. And in the meanwhile, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we were working like this. Sarabhai walks into the field and says, I understand that you're flying a balloon today. I wanted to see how you're doing it. At 4 o'clock, mind you, he comes to the field, and three of us, we were, instead of being excited, we really became nervous, because he was going to look at, and we were having a problem. And he saw that we were really having a problem, and he knew that we needed encouragement and inspiration. Look, I know that you got a problem today. I also know that it will be difficult to solve it sitting in this field for the rest of the day. Take this instrument back to the laboratory, look at it, look at all the problems. I'm sure that within the next few days, you will be back in the field flying it successfully. Please go, don't worry about it. And we were very relieved, because that is the kind of a direction we wanted to get from our boss. He said so. And we went, we worked on it, and next 2 days, it was a tremendous effort to identify the problem and correct it. It was an electromagnetic interference problem. And the electromagnetic interference problem, for those who are familiar with it can be a bloody nuisance anywhere you get into. So you had to solve that problem, and ultimately we had a successful flight. And when Parabai, again, he was not there in the field on that day when successful, but he came back and asked us what happened. And then he told a very profound statement. I would have been worried if you had flown that balloon on that day. You would have made some short-term technical fixes and you would have flown it. But you would have never understood the science and technology and engineering behind that if you're not gone to the laboratory, went into the details of it and not under pressure, and you learned everything. Today, you know about that instrument, another 50% more, simply because you delayed it by 2 days. Keep this in mind. Failures are never a matter of disappointment. They are always a stepping stone to success. I think that is the way, that is the message that we have carried forward. And I think it has put us, whether, as Prabhakar said, whether it was looking at the ISRO programs of satellites, looking at the ISRO program in its totality, or trying to conceptualize statements that you have to do in Rajya Sabha, because Rajya Sabha is a very difficult place to make a point, because you're the very difficult kind of a people, and you have to really make a point, and they should be convinced that there's a point worth hearing and discussing. So that is the other part of it. And then went to Planning Commission, which is the mother of all the planning that the country does. So you have to understand everything there. And ultimately, here came the final challenge from Javadekar ji. You make this national education policy. I personally feel, I think this is the mother of all the challenges I faced in my life. And I think having completed to the point that it is with the government, I feel I thank these people who gave me this kind of an opportunity, who gave me this kind of an inspiration and the type of confidence that we need in this country to work and succeed. I know all of you have had that kind of success in their own fields. But I thought sharing this at this particular point before I conclude my talk will be certainly something which is apt in the context of the type of people with whom I work, and paying homage to them for me is also a moral social responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity we had to hear you, and for such a comprehensive review of the education policy, and also of your experiences later on, the unwritten, unsung, unheard stories like the experience you had with Vikram Sarabhai. Now, many of the things that you have talked about, in fact, lend themselves to a great amount of discussion and some amount of questions that we may have in order to get some clarity. I have a couple of questions with me. The policy, as you said, seeks a fairly flexible curriculum, multiple exit points, and even the grading system will be different, assessment system. There is a question. The question is there any plan for grading learning objectives beyond grade 10 so that competitive exams do not pose a threat to students and foster the growth of coaching centers?
Yes, I think that's important. In fact, we have all through formulating this policy, one thing that was there is the formative assessment with compared to the kind of grading assessment that we need to do currently is one of the ways in which assessment has to be done. And we also wanted to make sure that the credit that you try to develop is done not in the end of a whole semester or a whole other end of the whole year, and then you do it every time you take a particular area, you complete the credits, requirement of credit for this, take an exam and get it through. This kind of thing essentially means that you also make the formative assessment with respect to the candidate also. This we think will enable the candidate to be less stressful in terms of trying to carry forward a year-long study into an examination system. The examination itself should never become the highest high-stake activity in the educational system. And we have repeatedly mentioned this in different locations of the policy to make sure that this flexibility is introduced. Initially, it could be twice in a year, but ultimately our idea is once you go fully digital, you can take these examinations at any point in the year, on any subject, and also you have the carry forward the credit. That is another important thing that we have tried to introduce. The carry forward the here means you can take your credit for one of the subjects in one college and maybe in another university in another places, and you can carry forward the overall credit. And there is a system with the UGC has developed now with respect to credit carrying forward. So we think these kind of arrangements and less stress with respect to carrying forward the whole year's work in terms of and finally with respect to even the what you may call as the test, the special test agency, national test agency, capable of carrying out this on an individual basis, certainly should reduce the pressure on the youngster and also does not give scope for this kind of coaching classes as the way to enter into the higher education or elsewhere also.
Thank you. There's another question related to your emphasis on creativity, problem-solving skills, and critical thinking right from the school stage. And that's from Tulsi Tiwari. Could I request Tulsi to read out the question or to raise the question?
Perhaps you should, Mr. Raja, because it will take some time to turn. Let's see if I can.
Can you?
His microphone is off.
Okay, shall I read it out?
Mr. Tiwari, can you?
Yeah,
I'm here.
Yeah, good.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, it's
go
a
ahead.
rare honor for me. Can I? Yeah. Professor Dr. Rangan, it's a rare honor for me to be asking a question to you here. Before I ask the question, though, I do not want to miss this rare opportunity of appreciating as a common citizen the kind of innovations that ISRO has brought about and the pride it has brought about to the whole nation. And the whole team of scientists and technologists deserve our respect, the way we respect our soldiers on the border, same way. And while I say so, my question is, especially in the context that the private sector has not much to show as a pioneering innovation, the way ISRO and other scientists have done is an extraordinary feat for our country. My question actually relates with some of the points that you have already made. And number one is that when you were referring to how in your PhD and how at the time of doing experimentation, problem solving was the fundamental issue, and no failure is a failure. And when the Chandrayaan 2 was happening, the whole nation was glued to the TV, sir. And it was so we are still no lesser proud, actually, despite that whatever happened in last 2 minutes, that the pain that we went through. And so what came out was that the nation as a team was still together, and nation is sure. So this my question actually relates with this very, very fundamental aspect of human mind, and that is self-confidence. Because unless one has a self-confidence, this kind of problem solving and overcoming of the failures never happens. And that is the fundamental of innovation and entrepreneurship. And my question actually is that how do you see this new education policy or whatever is being done in future times, and self-confidence will be addressed in our schools, because largely it is a common belief among the whole society, among all of us, what India lacks right now, what Indians lack right now, barring a few rare people, is self-confidence. So my question is actually this only, that how have you ensured that the self-confidence of the future generation will be far, far greater than the one which is existing now? Thank you, sir.
It's a very interesting question, and I think if you delve deep into the kind of rationale you have to develop for responding to your question, I think it's fairly complex. I want to say this to start with. What we have to is at no point in the educational policy you leave out a kind of program of teaching, learning, which is an unfinished story so far as the child is concerned. If you really look at the early childhood care and education, is what a classic example that when you talk of a 5 crore youngsters who are today not having the ability of numeracy and literacy, the reason is not just purely the question. It is not the problem of the child. It is the problem of a nature's way of humans, how their brain develops. My brain and your brain have not developed at the same space, but around 8th or 9th year, we both are at the same level. But then somebody has to recognize and make sure that the fellow whose brain is very strong in mathematics, but not probably in the language, and the other fellow who is in language, but not in mathematics, you need to recognize this and you need to correct it. And that is why an unstructured method of learning in the foundational phase of the school education is a must. It is not purely that teaching has not been good, the teachers have not been good, or things of that kind. Some of the very fundamentals of learning has been now brought into the policy. If you ask me, that is very critical, because ultimately if we can save these 5 crores of youngsters and save them so that they don't become 10 crores in another 10 years, by making sure that we address the questions by personal attention, identifying individuals' growth, and then make the corrections on an individual. There has to be a level of personal attention. There is no way you can escape that in the early childhood education. And that is where we have put a lot of emphasis that the first 5 years of education from the year 3 to year 8, I think it's extremely important to create that confidence. Many times, if you don't do well in mathematics in that period, you become afraid of mathematics. What you said about confidence, And once you become afraid of mathematics, you never will do mathematics. And though then you even withdraw from the school because you don't want to face a school teacher who is teaching mathematics. So these kind of things are all coming because somebody has not made enough attention to the fact that this boy's brain has developed a little late in mathematics, but at the late stage, he didn't get an opportunity to learn mathematics. So this is one aspect. I want to say this because to me that ECC and literacy and numeracy, I paid a lot of importance to that. In fact, I told Raja that I spent too much time on the school because I think that 10 crores is very critical to me because this is going to be the foundation on which we are going to build up India. So we need to make sure that that is one important example I have tried to do. The second part of it is with respect to the other part of creativity. We have still not created it. There is a culture there, and we need to have good set of people who can really create a culture for creativity and originality, innovation. We talk about a lot of it very much in the using English, but the fact remains that really, if you look at the ground, I think we have a long way to go. Only because of the fact, on one side, you need to have the right type of a learning environment. Second, most of the systems today are suboptimal. When you got suboptimal systems, whether it is in terms of teachers, the quality, or in terms of infrastructure, in terms of resources, other resources, I think the first casualty is the quality of teaching. And once the quality of teaching comes down, then your confidence of doing something among the peers starts going down. And once confidence starts going down among the peers, then you are a person with a limited confidence. And once you are limited confidence, you only go for those kind of jobs where that kind of a thing will give you a prominence. So this is again a linked issue with respect to how do you deal with this kind of situation. We need to have the best people to be flooding the educational systems at a level which has never been seen. There is no way than to give the best of the people the job. It doesn't matter which age he is. If you got a mathematician at the age of 22 who can teach in Stanford as a professor, there is no reason this country cannot have that kind of a professor in Stanford. This thing. So we cannot go according to the routines, way of promotions, evaluation, and those kind of things. We need to bring a new way to look at education and its culture. And I think that what do we need to do for that? We have gone fairly, at least this is a policy, mind you, so I cannot have a long, already it's more than 400 pages. And it has got so much of detail. We give details only for one reason. We don't want somebody to overlook certain things just because the detail is not there. So we wanted to give enough justice to make sure that our effort is not going waste because somebody didn't find certain things in that policy. To that extent, we have tried to plug all the loopholes. The idea that we have given so much of these only because it needs certainly a culture. We need to have a quality, and we need to provide that quality. We need to have the right attitude in the people. And so you need to bring a new generation because the problem with the kind of a system where you can compromise quality is that you will always remain so. And I don't think at the age of 50, if I'm having a substandard way of looking at things, I'm going to do a great job in the 50 to 60. That's not going to happen. So we need to have that culture. And I personally feel it's going to be one of the biggest challenges. The policy has everything that one is looking for. I think it will also provide enough amount of encouragement and all the inspiration that is needed. I'm sure the government is quite serious about it. I want to say this because I think at the Prime Minister's level, he has reviewed several times this policy and he has gone into the nitty-gritty. And he's quite serious about it. So there is a lot of academicians who are in this country, exceptionally good academicians. I think they have a big job to do. And every academician, whether he is right now retired or not retired, we have tried to make sure that he has a role in this policy because we're even teaching the youngsters in the early childhood on literacy. You can get the best of the people in the local area. You need not be necessarily a school teacher. You can get somebody else. So I feel an example of ECC is a good way of building up the confidence. The culture has to be changed that is there. The provisions for change, what do we need to do with a change in the culture is already there in the policy. This is all I can say with respect to the confidence.
Just a couple of more questions. As expected, there's one question on vocational education.
Yeah.
Right from the Kothari Commission, later on in the 1984 policy and so on, used to consider vocational education as a separate stream, at least beyond class 12. And they have been looking at other models like the community colleges in the US or the National Vocational Qualification Scheme in the UK or apprentice stream in other countries and so on. Here in your report, you have said that all education will be integrated. There will be no difference between liberal arts and science, between curricular and co-curricular, between vocational and a traditional education. Now, so the question is, can you throw some light on what the committee...
I think I should, first and foremost, the bane of the vocational education system in this country has been, there is a perception, I think to some extent it is true also, that people go for a vocational education because they have failed in an educational system. And this is something we wanted to remove, that people go to vocational education just because he couldn't go through a good rank in SSC or in the metric or in the undergraduate. And therefore, he had to have recourse to something which is acceptable, where he is accepted. And therefore, you go for a vocational education. First of all, that has been removed in the BCom, or you have a B Tech kind of a thing, or MBBS and so on. And the reason, and they are all compartmentalized. And today, the knowledge of a professional today is a sum total of the knowledge, not only of the practice that he has learned out of MBBS, for example, but also you should know the sociological implications of this, financial implications of it, the such parts of it, and the direction for the future. 3 or 4 elements out of the 3 or 4 elements of a 5-element system is not simply there in the education, because the provision doesn't exist in the colleges which only specifically teach MBBS and medicine or law in the law school and so on. So we have made sure that ultimately the role of an education should be holistic at this level, to make sure that you have a total knowledge even as you pursue your special knowledge. Otherwise, you cannot do the justice to your basic knowledge and your special knowledge without the total knowledge. So that is why we have tried to integrate professional education into higher education. The same rationale holds good for vocational education also. The vocational education, as I told you, is not a castaway area which is to be accepted simply because there is no person has no other avenue. He can pick up vocation because he loves to do, and tomorrow's vocational education may be related to artificial things which uses artificial intelligence, expert system, machine learning, and things of that kind. So please don't take the vocational education in the today's context of a polytechnic failure graduate. It is not so. Tomorrow's vocational education will be of the highest standards that you expect even from an undergraduate student in a Ivy school. So please make sure that vocational education is at par with the other types of education. Bachelor of Vocational Education is equivalent to a B.Tech in mechanical engineering from IIT, or it can be related to an MBBS in an AIMS. So let us not try to make a Bachelor of Vocational Education as a low-level kind of a thing. And this is applicable also for the diploma, about which I said even in the bachelor, in the undergraduate education. So the concept here is to equalize the importance and the ability of the youngsters to choose, not so much because something is easy and something he got through, but the other one is more difficult. That is not the rationale. The rationale is because he loves to do certain things in a skilled mode, in this thing. And the best of the people who succeed, whether it's Steve Jobs or anything, you can look at their past and then it clearly tells where exactly is the mind comes into picture in this kind of a thing. Unfortunately, we have relegated vocational education to a level we need to pull it out. And that is what we have done by putting it into the mainstream education. And we want all this system, whether it is vocational, whether it is professional, or the mainstream, we want all of them to come in the finally in the mainstream. Sorry, you're not able to hear you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to take up two more questions because we are running out of time. One is, given the fact that the majority of our workers aged 30 and above are functionally illiterate, we'd like to know what you would, we would like to know your views on adult worker education. That's one question.
There is a, I think I can quickly respond to that. There is an adult education section in which there is a lifelong learning and adult education.
Okay.
And adult education, we want to set up systems even within the existing infrastructure, create a new set of pedagogy as well as curriculum, and also create a scheme by the teachers in schools and higher education. They come and teach also the adult education. We have got a full scheme to deal with adult education, lifelong education, and also to deal with the illiterates in this context.
Just one more question I'll take up. That is, what does NEP have a plan for getting the best minds into teaching?
Yeah. I think that's a very good question. In fact, I'm happy to answer that. You know, again, when we discussed about the vocational education, our problem was, where does the society place the vocational education vis-a-vis the regular education? The answer to your question is not very different when it comes to teachers in the society. We have made sure that the teachers' role today is much more important than a mechanical engineer coming out of IIT. If you want to look at the number of people you have to deal with in the future that you have to address. So we have now, first thing we have done is we will teach all the teachers, whether it's school teachers or college teachers or higher education teachers, they will all have their basic degree from only higher educational institution. No more TEIs and all the rest of it which are there. We have given a phased operation to make sure that ultimately it is higher educational institution that will provide education for the teachers. Number one. Number two, this essentially brings the best of talents of the higher education institution in different areas. These are holistic. These are institutions where you get an opportunity to study in a holistic manner. And therefore, you have got people from different specializations coming together, and there is a quality. So that is where the environment in which the teacher will learn. And a 4-year. A 4-year is a must for a BEd. And if you have got a undergraduate degree other than the education, in 2 years you can get a BEd also. That is the second part of it we have said. The third aspect is, we are given that ultimate degree that they get will be a part of the mainstream, where whether it is a science degree, whether it is an engineering degree, other vocational degree, and also teacher's degree, they come from the same stream of education. At some stage, they branch out because they want to learn and teach and learn in the process, development of pedagogy, communication skills, some certain amount of research, and so on. But they are a part and parcel of a culture of learning, which is in the mainstream learning. So if we try to bring this, and we think that this has been now more or less something the government is very favorably looking at, we think that the distinction for the teachers to be kept as a separate category, and in the process trying to filter out a system where the best are not going there, that we have tried to change it by making sure that they are a part of a mainstream education system, where the quality and the rest of it which you get in IIT and other institutions for engineering is also applicable for teacher education at the undergraduate level.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I now realize, listening to you, that the NEP goes far beyond just educational development. As you have said right in the beginning, it aims at the holistic development of the entire human being, because you are starting from age 1 with not only education, but health, nutrition, physical activity, all the things that we need for the full development of human personality. And in that sense, I think it goes far beyond what one had really expected from just an education plan. And when I looked at the foundational skills, the first part, I thought that was crucial. And you said that 85% of the brain was formed by the age of 6. And therefore, if you take care of the child up to the age of 8, it'll make all the difference to his life and his fortunes. Now, that is a fundamental shift of paradigm, and that itself should make a great change to the generation that will be entering school next year or the year after. Thank you very much, sir. May I request Shanti Menon to propose a formal vote of thanks. Shanti is not an Athestian. She is too young to be an Athestian, but she is very close to us physically and emotionally. Her school is just next door, 2 blocks away. And she's a great friend of ours who's come here and been with us. Shanti, would you please propose a vote of thanks?
Dr. Raja,
Yeah.
on behalf of Atashri, Dr. Raja, Professor Laukare, Professor Bharat, who organized the conversations programs at Atashri, it gives me great pleasure to propose the vote of thanks. Our heartfelt gratitude to you, Dr. Kasturirangan. It has been most insightful and invigorating evening for all of us. All your little anecdotes while you were during all your learning phase and your growth truly gives us an idea of and a complete picture of how you chartered your success. All the back-end work that you've done on NEP, I mean, when as educationalists, when we read the NEP, we only see it as black and white wordings there. But today, it gives me a lot of clarity on why certain things are said, how it is said. For instance, when you spoke about vocational training, to us, it just sounded like what's new kind of thing, but it gave us a completely different perspective of how you have taken and how you all have visualized vocational education. And I think that truly is going to be a big step in making a change in skill building in students and children, and therefore employability in the future. It is the same with adult education. I think you'll have beautifully put it together. I know there's a section on adult education, and I didn't realize that the thought process was continuing learning. We didn't think of it as that kind. We just thought of it as, in all, it has been extremely a mind-blowing experience in terms of understanding what is in store for all of us. Like you said, it is up to us educators now to take it forward. The last question about the image of a teacher was a question which I had asked for myself, because I believe that unless the best minds are in the education sector, we don't see a change and the implementation and the successful implementation of NEP. So we do hope that apart from the lure of the tremendous kind of work and possibility that education has for educators, we also hope that financially it becomes viable for people to move into the sector, because today the country needs the best minds so that the future generations have the best people, fostering and molding them. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Kasturirangan. It's been such a immensely gratifying evening I'm sure I speak for everybody who's part of this. We have a large group who's on our viewership today, which comprises of heads of institutions of both Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, etc. We also have, like Dr. Raja said, Rotarians from Mumbai and Athashrians from other cities of the country. This is a large viewership, and I think naturally so, because every one of us who's on this viewership has and feels for the country's future, and we would like to know what we are going in for. Thank you very much for hosting this evening talk for us and giving us so much insight on the excitement that the new NEP will bring in for us. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Raja, for giving me this opportunity to
Pleasure.
speak on your behalf. I'm gratified that you always consider me as part of you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, Raja, yourself, Prabhakar, who is not seen here.
Thank you, sir.
And everybody else who have put so much of effort, Mr.
Really,
Bharat, and so on.
thank you for inspiring us to think of.
I really appreciate this evening. It will be memorable for me also, that you have this kind of a group which has all the sections of the cross section of the society, but with a very interesting kind.
We have
a very lively conversation.
Yeah, we have recorded this talk, and we can make it available or play it again to your faculty or the others who would be interested. With your permission, sir.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, right.
I have open mind on everything in life now. At this
Thank
age,
you.
I cannot have a close.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bharat? Yeah.
Thank you. I will end the meeting at this point. Thank you, everybody. Once again, thank you, Professor Kasturirangan. Goodbye.